Welcome to our roundtable, Adult Education, Overlooked and Underfunded. I'm Zaidee Stavely. I'm EdSource's immigration and education reporter. Adult education offers a lifeline for Californians who want to get their high school diploma or their GED, for acquiring career training, improving English skills, or for studying for a citizenship test. Adult education classes can dramatically improve the quality of life for adults and for their children. And Californians seeking adult education can turn to their neighborhood school, their community college, public library, employer, or nonprofits. But all of those agencies combined still only reach a small fraction of the adults who really need it in California. And funding for this work can be precarious. Today, we'll dig into the unique potential of adult education, the challenges it faces, and its future. Of course, we won't be able to get to everything, so we want you to think of this as a first conversation with more stories to come. Lastly, EdSource would not be able to bring us all together for our monthly roundtables if it weren't for the support of our funders. A big thank you today to the USC Annenberg Center for Health Journalism and Lumina Foundation for making today's roundtable possible. Now for our introductions. First, I would like to welcome to our panel Francisco Solano, a former student at Salinas Adult School and current PhD student at UCLA. Hi, Francisco. Kathy Locke is an ESL family literacy teacher at Oakland Unified School District. Steve Curiel is principal of Huntington Beach Adult School. Please also welcome John Werner, executive director of Sequoia's Adult Education Consortium. And last but not least, Carolyn Zachary, education administrator and state director of California's Adult Education Office. Special thanks to everyone working behind the scenes to help answer the questions as they come up today, and welcome to everyone in the audience. I'm going to turn it over now to our moderator, Emma Gallegos, EdSource's equity reporter.
Thank you so much, Zaidee, and thank you to everyone joining us today. I'm just going to get right into it. And, to understand why adult education is so important in California, I'd like to turn to Francisco. I wonder if you could share the journey that brought you to the Salinas Adult School.
Hi, thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. To begin, I was born and raised in Mexico. I migrated to the United States almost 16 or 17 years ago. In Mexico, I only had up until high school, and that was it. I was not interested in education other than that. So when I found myself in California, it was difficult to me to navigate all the lifestyle. I'm one of the 1.8 million undocumented people living in California. So education is very important for us because that's how we support, represent each other. For undocumented workers like myself, many times, or the only option for us is to have jobs like in the ag industry, in the agriculture industry, working on the fields, working on packing companies. So that's what I did for over a decade, almost 12 years. However, I realized that that was not life fulfilling, something that I was built to do. So I had the opportunity to go to the adult school by just a word of mouth. Some friend invited me to check out this adult school, and it sounded fun, sounded interesting. So I gave it a chance, and I began taking ESL classes at the beginning, and then GED classes, and I did this over the span of perhaps 8 or 10 years because I was working a full-time job to maintain myself, my family, and however, it was very satisfying. I found the adult school to be a really fulfilling experience because I was getting to know other people from other countries while learning to speak the language, and it was the beginning of a beautiful community with other people. So I really enjoyed my experience in the adult school. After that, the same adult school encouraged me to go beyond. So they pushed me to apply to community college after getting my GED. So that's what I did. I enrolled in my local community college, and then I also got assistance from counselors to try to be transferred to the University of California. So when I earned enough credits to be transferred, I transferred to UC Santa Cruz, where I obtained a bachelor's degree in molecular biology. While at UC Santa Cruz, I participated in laboratory research, and I found that very exciting and fascinated. So I decided to pursue research. So I applied for grad school, and I was fortunate to have an invitation from the UCLA, where I'm currently doing I'm beginning my thesis progress, and I'm currently doing research in pancreatic cancer. All of this is just because I had the encouragement from the Salinas Adult School to pursue my dreams and what I want. So that's how I ended up in the Salinas Adult School, and I'm still keep coming to the Salinas Adult School whenever I have a chance, just to say hi to my teachers, and just to it is still a beautiful community that I keep visiting every time I get.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, going from working on learning English all the way to working on pancreatic cancer. So it's an incredible story that I'm so glad you're able to share with us. And you talked a little bit about how you learned about it through word of mouth. And so I'd like to turn to this question. 3 out of 10 Californians struggle with English literacy so much that they struggle to do anything more than really fill out a basic form. So a lot of Californians are not getting the help they need. So I'd like to ask, open it up to anyone, what can California do to reach all these people who could really use adult education?
So I can go ahead and jump in and start on this. So I really think it is, as Francisco talked about, word of mouth, because a lot of times our adult learners have had maybe not so much success in school, so they're a little nervous to make that first step. But when they hear a story like Francisco's and some of our other amazing students, that gives them the courage to come forward and to walk in those doors of that school. And once they're inside those school doors, then that school community wraps around them and really supports them. But I know that throughout the state, all of our adult agencies do a lot of efforts to get the word out. I know that John actually speaks on some local radio talk shows and shares the information about adult ed in their community. And so it is word of mouth, but it also is those local adult directors who are spreading the news out in their communities and through their school districts. Many of our students are parents. And so to spread the word out through our school districts is another opportunity. But I'm sure John and Steve have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I'd like to turn it over to John.
Yeah, thank you. So word of mouth is a very powerful way of networking directly to students. We find that isn't quite enough, though, to give us the community presence that we want. So we think of marketing and outreach as being an active activity. We don't just want the school to sit on the side of the street somewhere waiting to be discovered by someone looking for opportunity. And when we think about marketing too, we really don't market our schools or our programs anymore, because look, they're not boring, but it's boring to advertise a school. It's a brick and mortar structure or a virtual school. What we like to market are the student success stories, like Francisco's story. And the reason we focus on the student success stories is that gives people that aspirational context. They can imagine themselves achieving the same that someone like Francisco's done or another student's done. They can picture themselves as, well, I was in that same boat at one point in my life, and look what this person's done. Maybe I could do this too. So we really try to, get those stories out in front of folks directly that may be potential students. Then we also market to what we refer to as like magnifiers. So those are going to be folks in our community, maybe a government agency, maybe a private maybe a nonprofit, maybe a private entity that have a broad reach of network themselves, and they can push our messaging through their channels. So we will also find ourselves doing direct marketing at places like farmers markets and flea markets in rural communities, and not just sitting statically at the chair like the person trying to sell you cell phone service. We get out in the stream of the crowd that's walking up and down the aisles, and we go meet and greet people and talk to them about what we do. We're also on radio. We do get onto television. We're getting ready to launch a television campaign this fall that will target students around high enrollment periods so that they hear us. We're also using now a little more sophisticated mass media marketing, and that is direct streaming service to reach right into specific neighborhoods that have folks living there that match up with who we want to serve with very specific messaging to them through their streaming video, like Tubi or Hulu, or, you know, we're all watching stuff online now, so through our smart TV. So we're trying to get sophisticated in that way too.
That's great. You know, and I know that, you know, marketing and outreach is a big part of it. But I also spoke to, you know, several people, several Californians who thought they would love to, you know, learn more English or get their GED, but they found it hard to go back because they couldn't find childcare, or the transportation wasn't really reliable. And so I wonder, either Kathy or Steve, I think you guys are probably in a good position to talk about some of the barriers that you've seen and maybe how you've also, you know, try to help students overcome them.
Sure. I get to teach parents at an elementary school, but my work is in the jurisdiction of adult ed in Oakland. And one of the things our program does is really prioritize putting funding into lowering those barriers that you mentioned. So actually, all of these classes that are on school sites for parents to learn English, we have childcare workers. So our classes provide babysitting for our students to be able to come with their children. Their children go to childcare, and then they're able to come and learn. And I think that as a district, we really named that as a barrier and really put our money where our mouths were, I think, and made that a priority to get adults in our classrooms so that they can do the learning that they need.
Yeah, and those are all, I mean, we are all trying to find out what works locally in our areas. And so for us, like childcare, I've been in adult ed for 20 years, and we'd ask, what do you want as a support service? And childcare typically is one of the first things, highest rated response. But then when we would offer the childcare, it was oftentimes passed over because what you're asking a parent to do, and typically these populations that are low literacy, there's a trust factor there, and it's hard enough just to come to the school and enter, and, you know, are you going to ask for documentation? And obviously we try to make that entrance as comfortable as possible, but then you ask them to bring their kids into this facility, and it hasn't been as effective or as used as we had anticipated. So we kind of pivoted, and we've had two strategies: the pre-COVID strategy, and then the world changed with COVID, and we had a different strategy. But pre-COVID, it was all about location. Address the transportation and try to be at elementary schools where at least the school age kids would be in school, and the childcare issues kind of addressed that way. I used to advertise or say we've got more locations than Starbucks, and we did. We had more locations, more access than the Starbucks were in our area. Post-COVID, we lost a lot of locations because obviously the concern about safety and social distancing, and so we've now, all of our ESL classes, some of our high school diploma classes are high flex, where students can access the course live from home. We provide them the computers and the hotspots, and that was a big push across the country, really. But we really grabbed onto that so that students, if there's a childcare issue, transportation issue, that at least they could, as much as possible, access the curriculum and the teacher live and ask questions. They can see each other, all the students can see each other online or in the class. So that's kind of removed the barrier and some of those issues. But on top of that, and it was kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, is that partner agencies have been tremendous in the adult ed world. I mean, it's humbling to see other agencies, because oftentimes as adult schools, you kind of feel like you're on your own, you're doing your own thing in your local district, you're not really always understood. But when you approach like social services agencies, advocacy, immigrant rights advocacy groups, other agencies serving the same population, all of a sudden you're on, hey, we'll help you. What do you guys need? We've got immigration lawyers that we can send over. We've got healthcare services. We'll come on campus and enroll students for free healthcare. And so our partners are really a big resource for us and our students to help address those barriers that students have in multiple. And I think that's one of the things that we've noticed, that it's not just one barrier, it's not just two barriers, it's like 4 or 5 barriers they're dealing with. And so partners have been invaluable in that. effort.
That's great. Well, and Francisco, I'd like to hear your story about, there was a point in your adult education where things were getting tricky, and there was an agency called Breakthrough Men's Community that you found really helpful. And so I'd like to hear how they helped you overcome some of the barriers that you were facing in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, Breakthrough Men's Community is a non-profit organization dedicated to the support of men's personal growth, emotional well-being. This program is designed to help men connect with themselves more deeply and with others as well. They explore issues related to masculinity and develop healthy relationships. And what it helped me is to really find that confidence that I have now to be able to try new things, to just do research experiment regardless of what other people might think, all the imposter syndromes. So these the program really helped me to really tap into those hidden gifts and talents that I have that are basically covered up by whatever culture or society or whatever history I have on me. So it allowed me to just know myself better and do something about it. I have the tools now to react in a healthier way to any circumstances. And I apply those same tools here in school whenever when I'm feeling stressed or when I have any challenges. So I believe that group is really good at empowering men into living a healthier life in any area. It's helping me a lot in just being more confident and trusting in myself, in my skills to be a good researcher.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And a theme that I've heard a lot when I talk to adult educators and even students is that adult education is not getting the attention it needs. It's kind of like a secret. And so, I want to ask first, why is that a problem? And is there anything we can do to change that?
I'll take a stab at it first, and then John can clean up whatever I say. But I think in my personal theory, and trying to understand that, because when you hear our policymakers talk about the populations they're trying to serve, the homeless, the incarcerated, the immigrants, the poor, those are our students. That's who we're working with. And then when it comes to policy decisions, that's when we don't hear our name being mentioned, and we don't have adult ed. Although I will say we're seeing a change in that. We are now seeing adult ed mentioned in a lot of these initiatives. But I think part of it goes back to, especially if you think of a policymaker's pathway from childhood and how they developed and the experiences they had, and our superintendents and board members, most of them probably were pretty successful in school. And the adult school was where the bad kids went. And so their understanding of what adult school is and what it does might be very limited based on their limited experience growing up and being successful in whatever they're doing, whether it be policy or education. And so I think part of it is just a lack of knowledge of the resources and the capabilities of adult education, and that has been sometimes evident when we meet with legislators and they say, "Tell me about our adult schools. I don't know much about it," and some of them have one of the largest adult schools in California right in their district. So it is a matter of just exposure and not being out there. And even though we market, and I'll say this, and we all try to market, all of our administrators, where we try to market, but we're not trained as marketing people. We're educators. We went through to be teachers and administrators. No, there's no class on marketing. So we're figuring all this out, and really we're targeting our students and this whole other population of policymakers that is a little bit more, probably a different approach to reaching them and getting ourselves known. And obviously it comes back to finances, which we'll probably talk about later, but I think that's part of it. But I'll leave the rest for John to add to, and anyone else.
Yeah, I don't think adult school or the equivalent programs over at K-12 adult or our equivalent friends over at the community college doing their non-credit certificate type work and CT work. I really don't think that they get or we together get enough recognition, credit, or focus out of lots of levels of government or local. Now, there's been some work lately that's tried to bridge some of that between K-12 and community college programs through pathways, and adult schools have been involved with that to some degree. And I think what Steve was touching on, it brings back a thought to me, is that when I think of students who benefit from the types of programs that we offer, Steve's right. They're not. I did this. I went in a linear progression from kindergarten through a bachelor's degree, took a break to go work for a little while, and then came back and got an advanced degree to be a school administrator. And really, that's abnormal for most of our folks in our communities. What's normal is people kind of go through life like a pinball in the pinball machine, and they bounce from bumper to bumper to bumper to bumper, trying to score points here and there to get a little bit better lot in life. And that little bit better lot in life means a little better financial security, a little better emotional, mental health status, like just doing better that way, a little better physical health, better for their kids, better for their family members, more security all around. They don't take a linear pattern. And so they come back to programs that have flexible offering, flexible times, flexible locations, and they offer those types of trainings that meet them where their need is. And every educator understands this. Quality education is about meeting a student at their learning, like that challenge need, not frustration, not too easy, but at their challenge learning need. And adult ed does that for students who are coming back for a diploma or GED or a nursing certificate like LVN or advanced manufacturing or some, other licensure. For our adult population, it's like going to Harvard. It is the right for that graduate student going to Harvard Law. Our adult schools are the same thing to the students we serve because it's the appropriate level of education at the right time, delivered in the right way for them. And that puts adult ed in a very special place in community enhancement and development. Our adult schools are like economic recovery and a nation coming through a financial struggle as an emergency room is to a pandemic. During the pandemic, our emergency room took in some of our most at-need people and triaged them to the right medical care that they need. Adult schools do very similar work with education and goal attainment for populations that are at need.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I want to turn to something that I find very interesting about adult education is that it doesn't just serve the adult student. And it can be life-changing, not just for them, but for their children. So Kathy, I'd like to hear more about your work that's really heavily focused on teaching parents in Oakland Unified.
Yeah, I would love to talk about my work because I think it's awesome. I teach family literacy in Oakland, and we have 6 classes on 6 elementary school sites, and these are all places that have the principals or school leadership have asked for us to, through the adult program, have asked teachers to come in and teach English and school success skills to the parents there. And I think that if school districts really are trying to provide equitable learning for their kids, you have to provide learning for parents, especially in places where there are a lot of newcomers and English language learners. And my program is modeled after the National Center for Family Literacy. And they actually just put out they did like a 10-year study of what they saw in family literacy classes across the country at 90 Title I elementary schools. And they found that the parents who were attending these classes to learn English, to learn how to help their kids in school, the children had more increased literacy at home. They were reading with their parents. The parents had greater self-efficacy and they felt empowered to participate in the schools. And they even had data around attendance and reading performance and about how, compared to the peers who didn't have parents in these classes, they had significant gains. And so I think that much of education talk in the media is about K-12 and about marginalized children and the achievement gap. And I think that we often miss like a huge opportunity to look at parents as part of the solution for helping kids achieve more in school, especially those kids who don't speak English at home.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next point, that the community school model, which has been gaining more traction and funding in California, it does take parents into account. And so these community schools, their goal is to transform schools into neighborhood hubs that serve community members and families as well as students. And so I don't know if anyone works with or in a community school, but I'd like to hear how you think that this model will help adult education, and also how adult education is going to help those community schools.
So Emma, I'm really glad that you talked about this, and listening to Kathy, it's the perfect segue, of course, to this. And community schools are in the division, the Career and College Transition Division. So the community schools program is within the division that the adult ed office is in. And so I actually work with their administrator, and we are trying to get that messaging out about partnering with your local adult ed program. And we do have many adult ed, or many districts that also have adult ed programs that have received grant funding through the community schools grant. So we're excited about that. And it's what we want to do is we want to help those districts to see that they don't have to look outside of their district for their partner to help parents, that they're right there with the adult school. And I think the other thing that's important, and Kathy talked about this, and it was K-12 student success. And that's one of our program areas for our state funding. But also at the federal level, we are the Adult Education Family Literacy Act. That's the title for Title II. And we still have that family literacy piece. Even though there's a bigger focus on workforce, I keep hanging my hat on that family literacy piece and the importance of that, because family literacy and helping parents to help their children is a way that we will help close that achievement gap.
And I'm curious to hear a little bit about most adult education students are immigrants and English learners, and how can we better serve those students who end up wanting to go beyond adult education and get a bachelor's degree? Of course, I know many of them are going to get vocational degrees at adult schools that they don't have to go all the way through. But I'm curious to hear from someone like Francisco, who's gone all the way through, to get a doctorate, but even just to get a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I was one of the persons who didn't believe in education because I thought it was expensive. And this is the misconception that most of the adults have regarding education, that it's impossible to pay something like this. And so I got through community college thanks to a bill that California offered. I think it's called AB 540, that allows some students to get funding from the state to cover the units that are required to go to college. However, that's very limited. I have not followed up yet with the updates of that bill, but that's something that's on the back of the minds of every adult parent. How will you be able to afford something as expensive as this? For many of the parents, is the priority is children first, right? And if I have time, then I'll do something for myself. However, that's not always true. That I was able to go to get a bachelor's degree because the state was able to help me cover that cost. And it's not really marketizing or well advertised. It's out there, and it might not be for everyone because there are some limitations. So perhaps a change in the law, a change in those bills that help parents also be treated as regular students who are able to apply for scholarships, for grants, so they don't have to be worried about the finance. It's going to be a huge benefit for everyone in the future. So that's something that I would like to see someday.
Yeah, and Cost is an interesting issue because it looks a little different in different places. I would say most of or all of the adult education seems to be free or low cost, but that can mean different things in different places. And I think if you're someone trying to navigate that, it can be tricky. So, for instance, I was looking in at one college, becoming a vocational nurse might be $17,000, and another it might be $7,000. Some places might cover GED testing fees, some might not. And so I wonder if you can address this cost issue. It's different places, and there might be some costs that you don't think about. So, and this is a population where they don't have a lot of money, and probably every dollar really counts.
Well, that's a great. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if it was for Cisco, but I'll take a stab because that is something we're well aware of, and we've made some efforts to try to deal with that. And like you said, it's different depending on what district you go to, what school, what adult school. Our school, adult school, used to charge fees for our CTE and for GED as well, because it wasn't in the budget. We would allocate our funds to offer more ESL classes or offer more high school diploma, whatever it may be. And then at the end of the day, the CTE classes were expensive just because of books and equipment and trying to add new programming. And typically CTE is not the biggest program at an adult school. It's usually ESL or high school diploma GED. And so you have these small career training programs and you try to develop new programming. And that's been an effort by the state, a push by the state. There's been monies to help with that. But in the past, if you wanted to build a new program and your funding was capped, which has been the case for us for the last 10 some years, then you have to find another way to fund those. In many ways, you had to rely on fees. But in order to eliminate the fees, which we just did last year, was we had to make a decision. We're not going to offer as many ESL or as many high school diploma classes so that we can expand our CTE offering so the students have this pathway and more options in CTE. So it was not without a lot of discussion and agreeing to take some cuts somewhere else in order to make that happen. But I think the reality is, and I think what my colleagues will agree, is that our funding being locked and no way to expand, even when we have a need and a demand, that absent of new increased funding or a mechanism so that we can add classes and be reimbursed by the state, you're forced to do things like charge fees or find other revenue sources to offer those programs. And so again, in different districts, you're going to have different situations and different outcomes.
Actually, Emma, a couple of different people in the audience asked questions about how to advocate for more funding because of, one person said that they are not actually able to do outreach for their ESL classes because they're completely full. And so the question was, how can we advocate for more funding now? Since we actually don't have room for everyone who we could serve.
Yep.
Can I?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So we have professional associations in our world. California Council for Adult Education, the California Adult Education Administrators Association, CCA and CAIA. There's ACE on the community college side. There's the Association of California School Administrators. CTA, California Teachers Association, certainly advocates, as well does CSEA, does some advocacy work more broadly around education. CCA and CAIA partner together, and they have a broad coalition, but they partner very closely together at the state level to advocate for all kinds of adult education-focused priorities in regards to policy. Funding is one of those things. And what I would recommend to folks, if you want to get involved with that and get into that and support it, reach out to your local chapter, CCA or CAIA. They have websites, and there's lots of ways to be involved with that conversation. We don't all have to go walk the halls of Sacramento to get more recognition and advocacy for adult ed programs. It starts with your local government officials, your mayor and city council members and folks knowing that valuable school is there, and them knowing how to help connect people that they know need the programs and services that are offered at that. And same with the college professional associations. At the federal level, we have COABE, which does a lot of advocacy around policy at the federal level. So that's another way to become involved. And once you're a CCAE member in California, you are automatically a COABE member. Not trying to do a sales pitch for them, but that's a way to do it. And CCAE and CAIA, I will tell you, I do a lot of, support around the nation, probably have the most sophisticated advocacy strategies in the nation. They are sophisticated in what they do and how they do it, and do a very, very good job with it, and can always benefit from more hands on deck helping out with that.
And I'll add to that. I think definitely working through our local associations and advocating through them because of the professional systems that they have in place. But also everyone, adults have the right to vote and make decisions and call their legislators and ask them what's going on, what are you doing for adult education? And it's a tough ask, to be honest. We're part of a K-12 public education system. Our funding comes out of the same Prop 98 funding that goes out to schools. And so legislators have to make a decision between kids and adults. And so that has to be, we want to be fair to that. That's a tough position to put legislators in. But if you look at our funding levels as it relates to kids and adults, we get about 1,800, I think is my rough numbers, about $1,800, $1,900 per student on the adult ed side. High school K through 12 is about 12,000. So it's almost 7 times more funding for the kids. And what we've been advocating is a little bit more funding, as we kind of explained with parent literacy and some of these programs that we have that really have an impact on the families, could go a long way in reaching and trying to close some of those gaps that we are spending a lot trying to do in our K-12 system. So helping legislators understand that maybe a little bit more investment will give them even more of a return, and leveraging the adult systems that are out there, I think is something that our supporters would be helpful for them to share and advocate for, just in that with that concept alone.
Emma, if I can add a quick comment, I know we have a broad audience on today and people that will watch this later on. And, a lot of people here have a deep passion to help kids, especially kids in poverty. And I want you to remember something. If you want to help a child in poverty, you have to help an adult in poverty, because only the adult can go get a job tomorrow. It's just, and we all love kids, we all want to help kids out. And a good way is through their parents.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, that's something I was hearing over and over. How do we change this? So, I want to ask about some of the regions where the need for education is the highest. And so that's a lot of rural communities. English literacy is really low in the San Joaquin Valley, Imperial Valley, also parts of the Central Coast. And I know there's need everywhere, all across the state, but I'm curious, how adult education can better serve these areas that really do have the highest need.
Well, John, I'm going to let you take a little bit of this because part of you're in the southern San Joaquin Valley. So maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing there and we can add on as we go.
Yeah, I thank you, Dr. Zachary. I think it starts with strong partnerships with rural communities, rural school districts that may not be able to land their own adult program or have had one historically. We do that. We leverage existing programs to reach into neighboring communities through their K-12 school districts. We do that in partnership with the community college. We do it in partnership with our local community-based organizations. An ideal situation looked like a wing of classrooms at a rural community high school. And if you can picture in your mind 5 or 6 classroom doors in a row, one of them was an adult school, K-12 adult school ESL class. Another one was a community college ESL class. And another one was a community-based organization ESL class. And then another one was a citizenship prep class The last one was a classroom for childcare that was supported and funded by that local school district. So those types of partnerships help us jigsaw solutions into communities that just can't do the lift on their own. The two biggest barriers our rural communities face, time and distance, right? Time and distance. So we've got to get the program to them to mitigate at least the distance barrier.
And so I'd like to add on to that, John. Thanks. You really talked a lot about some of the areas that I want to focus on, and that is this idea of within our consortia model, we're able to have the consortia see where the needs are and work to put programs out in those communities. So we have an area kind of on the east side of Sacramento in Placer County, where Placer County goes all the way to the Nevada line, has some very rural areas there. And within that consortium, they are ensuring that there are programs right along that Nevada border line and ensuring that in those communities within their county, which has dense population, and then the rural population, that they are having programs face-to-face, as well as hybrid opportunities for students and online classes. And I think one of the silver linings for us in adult education from the pandemic was this notion of online instruction and hybrid instruction. When we talk about hybrid or high flex, talking about the opportunity for a student who might not be able to get to class today because they have a sick child. They can text their teacher and say, I can't make it today. And the teacher says, no problem, here's the link to class. We'll look for you online. The student doesn't miss any of their programs. So online instruction, distance education, we've been doing distance education in adult ed for a very, very long time before anyone else was really doing this. And now we're really seeing all the fruits of that labor with our districts, our agencies, community-based organizations able to offer many more programs in different modalities for students. And certainly in some of our rural areas, we do have some connectivity issues. And so that's where we really have to have those face-to-face classes, or bringing together students in a rural community together where there is connectivity to have a class pushed into that area.
I'd like to come back to this, distance learning high flex issue. But before we go there, I'd like Francisco to weigh in, just because he's in one of these communities. A lot of these are agricultural communities where there's a lot of high need. And so, Francisco, I'd just like to hear from you what was really helpful getting you through, making sure that you had the time, it was easy to get to. I mean, did you feel like this was a convenient option for you?
It was not convenient at all. And I like to add a little bit of controversy to this discussion because in my experience, what I experienced from working in the ag industry all these years is that companies and industries doesn't want the adults to get educated because we are cheap labor. If we get educated, then we'll move out to other jobs and we'll start asking for equal pay and all to have a just being treated equally and fair. So that's perhaps the goals that we have not talked about. It's just the industries out there that don't want us to get educated. So we're fighting towards that. So we're doing a great job in trying to come up with plans and try to advertise for the adults. However, we're fighting against these big companies who, own half of California, and the salad companies is a huge industry. So it's difficult for us to work together just as a small community and fight either the political issues or the big industries. So it was not convenient at all. It was very exhausting, and that's what I see with my peers. They are not able to get out of that lifestyle because it's so difficult for them to be able to have a job that secures rent and food for their families, and at the same time find time and resources to go to school or try something else. So the adult education is poorly advertised in these areas. I never seen a flyer in my company or any advertising on TV. It was just I learned about the adult school just through word of mouth. So advertising is really low, and then if you get to advertise that in these communities, then you'll be fighting against the big corporations because they don't want to lose their workers.
I'm curious, what would there be kind of like a time issue, or I mean, what were the things that kind of stood in the way most, or that you see, I don't know, the employers standing in the way of more education?
Time is definitely an issue. It's most of the jobs for adult in California are seasonal. So sometimes people are working 12-hour shifts, 6 days a day, 6 days a week. So time is an issue sometimes. And when there is time, there is not enough resources for them to pay the children for childcare or have enough money for the bus, or just they're constantly worrying about these little things that they shouldn't be worried about. So there's a lot of lack of funding in this regard.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'd like to turn back to this distance learning, high flex, remote, whatever you want to call it, because it does seem to have a lot of promise, not just because of the pandemic, but because there are students in really hard to reach areas, or they don't have childcare, they don't have transportation, or they don't have enough hours in the day to do the commute. And so, but then I also, this is something I asked Kathy, I'll ask you now, just about, how effective is distance learning for adult learners? Like, what are some of the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I think that distance learning is wonderful because of the flexibility, and I see a lot of parents and adults in Oakland who are very interested and take online classes to learn English, to learn digital literacy. But I do think there's an equity issue around who needs these services, adult education classes. And I think that the more marginalized, the greater your need in terms of English level, the harder it is to access the technology, be able to use the technology to do distance learning well. So one of the things that I do as an online teacher, I also teach online, is it is very hybrid. Like we have our students come in to learn, to physically, manually learn the technology, to learn the skills they need to make the most of distance learning. Because as a language teacher, I just don't think it's very effective to be listening to language all the time as a way to learn a language. And so we have to really, I think, be critical about our pedagogy around teaching digitally, teaching online, and about what our students actually need, and making sure that we lower as many of the barriers we can to make online learning, hybrid learning, whatever it is, as interactive as it can be.
Right.
I just real quick, sorry, and I wanted to echo on some of those ideas from Kathy, is that our distance online platforms are pretty cool. Some of our adult schools here in the Valley were, during the pandemic, able and ready to flip to a virtual instructional model within a couple weeks. Not perfectly, but within a couple weeks, because we were sort of built for that. The thing to remember, though, is next to the student, the most critical person in learning is the teacher. And that relationship between what the teacher does and the student learns is critical. And it can't be replaced by a computer or an online platform. Those things can supplement it, and they can augment it, and they can make it more effective and quicker, but it takes a teacher working with that student to get high learning, to reach those high goals we're after.
And just to be fair, Kathy talked about the training for the students and making sure they're ready to perform in this online environment. But that for the teacher is also a stressful scenario trying to manage online, especially if it's a live hyplex. They're looking back and forth between what's happening online and what's happening in the classroom. So a lot of professional development, making sure that's available for teachers, that they have the right technology, that they have the tech support, because there's nothing more frustrating than walking in and your laptop's not booting up or the sound's not working. So there's a whole system of support that goes behind the teachers and then the training into the teachers that has to be there. And oftentimes you, as administrators, you shy away from it because it's just too overwhelming. There's too much that you have to do. So you can't always get it to work right. And then it's like, okay, let's go back to more brick and mortar, and that's the only option we offer students. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do, because it is a grandiose task to make that available in the right way and the way it should be.
There's a question from someone in the audience that is, how does accountability work? So how do we know what funding adult schools in all the different ways that they exist, adult schools, K-12, community college, other agencies, and do they get funding through local control funding formula? Do they have to do like local control accountability plans, like what the school districts have to do for K-12 education? And if not, how else can we, I guess, hold adult education accountable? I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
I can certainly chime in from kind of the state high level perspective, and I know John can talk about at the consortium level and Steve at the district level. So from the high level state accountability and funding, we have two funding streams that support the adult education system in California. The largest pot of money is the California Adult Education Program dollars at 600 million or so. I think there's a little more than that now. And that goes out to the 71 consortia throughout the state. And they have requirements that they have to meet every year through an annual plan, which would be similar to an LCAP or local control accountability plan. And then they also have to do a three-year planning cycle. The other piece of funding that we have, and those funds go to the 71 consortia that fund K-12 adult schools and community college non-credit programs, support those programs. The other piece is federal dollars through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding. And as I said earlier, we're Title II, Adult Education Family Literacy Act. And California receives about $112 million annually for that work. And that funds through an application process, an every 4-year cycle competitive application process. We fund K-12 adult programs, we fund community college non-credit programs, we fund library literacy programs, community-based organizations, correctional institutions. So we have a wide range of programs that we support through those federal dollars. And with federal dollars, there's a lot of accountability. And one of the requirements for our programs is to do an annual plan that's a forward-looking plan into the next year through writing SMART goals as to how they're going to use their funding in the next year, and they're going to move the needle for their students. In addition to that, they have to report student attendance and participation, and there's pre-testing and post-testing. So there's a great deal of accountability, and you can look at California's data on the NRS website. And I know one of our folks in the background here will throw the NRS website in there, and you can look at California's national data. But I think it's important to hear sort of from that consortia level what their accountability is, because they have quite a bit of accountability for state dollars. And then Steve, who's funded he receives funds for both federal program dollars and state dollars. John?
And we just have one more minute, so make it real quick.
I'll be real quick. So at the consortium level and local level, each participating school and college has its own governance board, which provides oversight to that agency. We also have a regional consortium board, which provides governance and oversight and program evaluation over all its members. We also have, in my consortium, and I know this is true around the state and a lot of them, our schools participate in WASC accreditation, which is another evaluation type performance criterion, and some have other types that they participate in as well.
Okay, Well, thank you so much, you guys. I'm going to turn it back over to Zaidee, but I just want to thank all of you. I feel like we just scratched the surface, but thank you again.
Thank you.
We want to thank all of our panelists, including those who are working behind the scenes answering questions. Thank you also to the USC Annenberg Center for Health Journalism and the Lumina Foundation for the support that allows us to have these monthly roundtables.